Ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching this, then you're probably considering the idea of building a mobile app. And in which case, good for you because it's probably the definition of passive income because it's something you build once, you reiterate upon time to time, but it's something that generates a passive flow of revenue, which I know from experience that you just build once and mostly forget. However, there are a couple of falses that people often fall for that if you fall for, you are going to set yourself up for failure. And I know this from experience because, as a matter of fact, a I built a mobile app that was a catastrophic failure. Everything was seemingly set up nicely, but it not only made zero money, I ended up losing money on top of that. So I am a professional in this case and losing money. However, what that made me is a professional in avoiding the same mistakes in the future. And that's the reason why my newest app, Salesy, became profitable in like 3 weeks. And in this video, I'm going to be teaching you the main things that you should know and you should avoid if you are someone who is new to app development. So let's start off. Path of least resistance. And what I mean by path of least resistance is just generally good advice in business, because if you develop a mobile app, obviously there's going to be coding involved. You're probably going to be building on a Flutter framework or something similar, which if you try to learn from scratch, it's going to take a year at the very minimum before you can even build anything. So first off, you need to figure out the path of least resistance. And now, if you search up tools for building apps, the first thing that's going to pop up are AI agents, which I am going to touch upon a bit later in this video. But something that you will probably consider even more are low-code tools. However, there are many of them, and it's very hard to know which one to use, and this endless sea of agents, low-code tools, etc. There are a couple. So first one I would like to mention on my kill list is Adalo. Adalo is, I'm sure it's a good company, but the tool it provides is very good for beginners. But if you want to build anything that builds any revenue whatsoever, forget about Adalo. It's on my kill list. Second, I haven't used really, but I think Bubble is also in the same group as Adalo. There is no learning curve whatsoever. You could probably log in and in 10 minutes build a simple UI. But the apps, and I know this from experience, at least Adalo, I actually had a client who built his app in Adalo. It was super slow, like incredibly slow. And he came to me to reprogram it using the Flutter framework, which ended up making the app lightning fast. So don't fall for these two tools. What you should fall for is this program right here, and it is called Flutterflow. Flutter is a framework used to build cross-platform mobile apps. What that means essentially is just iOS and Android in one batch. That's it. Flutter is incredibly fast. And Flutterflow in general is such an amazing tool. And if you search it up, you are probably going to see reviews such as it's not real coding. Who cares? Listen, I'm in this business to make money. I'm not in this business to boost my ego by calling myself whatever a real coder or programmer is. I'm not a nerd. I don't want to be a nerd. I want to make money. And hopefully you do too. So don't fall for these reviews. There is some truth to this criticism because the code that Flutterflow provides, sure, it isn't the highest of quality. Obviously, if you hire a team of the developers and pay them hundreds of thousands of dollars, the code quality is going to be better. But the apps built in Flutterflow are so incredibly powerful that if you have anything less than 100,000 users, you are probably not going to even notice the difference. So use Flutterflow. It's the path of least resistance. And if you have programming knowledge, learning Flutterflow is going to be a piece of cake. It has its limitations, as I mentioned, but if you have some knowledge in programming, you can surpass these limitations because Flutterflow also provides the functionality that you can add your code. You can add your actions, functions, code files, whatever. You can add them yourself. It is a paid tool if you want to launch your app. If you want to create 2 apps, a maximum of 2 apps for free, but not launch them, you can use it for free. But if you want to deploy your app to any stores, you are going to need a subscription, which is not that expensive. I think it's like $40 a month. So it's not that bad. And after you launch it, you no longer have to pay the subscription. So Flutter, it's amazing. And just to touch upon the criticism a bit more, imagine this. Imagine you have a container, right? And this container can have several lines of code. It's a simple square, but it can have several lines of code. And imagine you take the code of this square and you just store it somewhere in a text file, for example. And now you're writing your code, and at one point you need a container, so you just copy it from the text file and paste it in. And that's essentially what Flutterflow is in a nutshell. It's a library of preset widgets that you can take, you can put somewhere, and you have a visual way of modifying them. That's it. But that's a bit unrelated. It's just to touch upon the criticism that you will inevitably face if you actually do decide to use Flutterflow. Next up, agentic coding / vibe coding. Should you use it or should you not? And the answer is very nuanced, because a lot of people say that you can now create your own apps in a weekend using Claude Code, ChatGPT, leveled, whatever. That's not true. You can create AI slop. Claude Code is incredibly useful, and it's incredibly powerful, but the fact of the matter is that we aren't living in an age where you can absolutely forget about developers at all, build your app in a weekend, and publish it on the App Store. For one, it's going to be incredibly low quality and it's not going to perform at all. Second, and this is even more important, is that the App Store is actually cracking down on AI-built apps due to their lack of quality. So if you use Claude Code, and if between these tools, use Claude Code, 100% you should definitely get the Pro subscription because it's incredibly useful and it's only $20 a month. Get Claude Pro. It's incredibly powerful. ChatGPT, for simple tasks, it's fine, but overall, I dread using ChatGPT for anything other than very simple tasks. However, the reason I said it's nuanced is because you have to learn the difference between these two tools. Some people use them interchangeably, but that's not the correct way to use them. And this is a visual example of why. This is the real case study I actually had today. I wanted to create a wordmark logo for my newest app, Salesy. First thing I did, I launched Claude. And I gave it specific instructions to create a custom typeface, whatever, wordmark logo for my app, Salesy. And this on the left is the result. To remind you, I am paying for the Claude Pro subscription. I use their latest, most powerful, exclusive model with extended thinking, whatever. And this is the result it came up with. The one on the right, however, is from ChatGPT with a free subscription. ChatGPT created this in probably under 30 seconds, and Claude thought about this for the high end of 10 minutes, I think. So know the difference between these two tools, because as I mentioned here, you don't want to try hammering in screws. You need to learn the difference between a hammer and a screwdriver to achieve an optimal result. Because if you try to use the wrong tool for the wrong occasion, you're going to end up with whatever this is. So learn the difference between these two. ChatGPT works better for visual design. Claude works better for, I would say, absolutely anything else. It's more human. It makes less errors. It makes less hallucinations. And it doesn't lie to you, generally speaking. When it doesn't know something, it just tells you up front. Moving on. UI and UX principles. This is one of the most important parts, because if you even start learning Flutterflow, but you don't know anything about UI or UX, the result you are going to create is going to be terrible. And I've seen this over and over again because I actually have had clients in the past who have a bit of programming experience, perhaps a bit of experience with Flutterflow, but they are absolutely incompetent when it comes to UI or UX. And the result shows. So what you should do is you should go on to dribble.com. I think it was like with 3 B's or something, dribble.com. look at the most popular designs. Not all of them are going to be great, but what you can do is you can copy these designs, try to create them in Flutterflow, and if you want to publish your app, I wouldn't suggest copying designs verbatim, so to say. Obviously, that's not ethical, but what you will stumble upon is the fact that if you're not very experienced, copy a design, you are going to learn certain UI principles, such as, and actually, I will write this down because it's probably one of the most important, which is text hierarchy. And text hierarchy is a simple UI principle that just states that people, like, look, this is everything about text hierarchy. You are going to look at this first, and you're going to look at this second. Now, if I make this bold, make it the same size, now you are going to look at this first, and then you're going to look at that. Maybe I could make it smaller, whatever. That's text hierarchy. But if you don't know these principles, the result that you will create is going to be mediocre at best. So search up videos on text hierarchy, on general UI principles, and learn about them so that the result that you output just flourishes. And as I mentioned, copy a design, learn from it, and then reiterate upon it. So next up, monetization. Again, if you're watching this, you're probably in this business for making money and not necessarily being able to call yourself a programmer. Because again, I'm in this business for making money. I don't care if I'm considered a programmer or not. I want to make money, and this is exactly why I will teach you about how you can actually make money with your apps. Because as I mentioned, Salesy, which by the way, if you want to learn sales, get Salesy. It's completely free. You can roleplay with AI prospects and so on. It became profitable in like 3 weeks. We got our first paying users in under 3 weeks. And the reason for this is not because we had a massive amount of features or whatever. The app is actually fairly early stage. It is fairly limited in its features, but there are habit building loops which incentivize the user to stick around and possibly to make money. And this is how it should work. First of all, create a freemium model. You should offer something for free, and when you have actually provided some value to the user should feel a bit of negative emotion when they hit some sort of wall. For example, let's say you play chess. Chess is a great example. You can play as many games you want, but if you want to do things like game review or you want to do more puzzles, then you need a subscription. You need a subscription. In between here, this is the most important part, which is the paywall. This is, how could I show it? I guess we can create a diamond. This is the initial value that you provide your users, but after a while, they have to feel the pain of missing out on something. And the best places to place a paywall in is after a user already gets a bit of value. As an example, in chess.com, and you may already know this, you can do 3 puzzles a day, but if you want to do more, you have to get a subscription. And they immediately prompt you with a paywall, they show you the value, and they interrupt that process, that pleasant process of, let's say, completing puzzles while you're on the bus, as an example, right? So interrupt somewhat pleasant moments where the user already has some value and offer them more. And how you can actually make more money is through ads, obviously. And if you're using Flutterflow, as a matter of fact, it's incredibly easy to do this because Flutterflow offers a Google AdMob integration, which, without going into too much details, just means you can show Google Ads within your app. The best way, in my experience, is using rewarded and interstitial ads. So, rewarded ads, I think the name speaks for itself. It's something you show to a user. It's an ad you show, after which they get some type of value, whatever. They get tokens, they get a bonus, they get a potion, whatever it is, they get a bonus. Interstitial ads function a bit differently, but they're fairly similar. Because if you have used Duolingo in the past, you already know this. After you complete a course using the free plan, you are gonna have an interstitial ad. So enter. And how it works is very simple. You complete a course, for example, and this is exactly how it works in Salesy. You complete a course, you watch a short interstitial, and then you move on. You can interrupt some processes, but don't overdo it, obviously, because that's just going to turn users off. They're going to leave your app immediately. And also, don't do banner ads. This is also something I often see new developers falling for, because it's something that you can place absolutely anywhere. But the fact of the matter is that it's not going to make you any money, because banner ads are the least rewarding ads of all. They make your app feel incredibly cheap. So don't do banner ads at all. At all. Just forget about them. They're not going to make you any money. And realistically, they're going to probably lose you users because they feel incredibly cheap. Imagine going through what seems to be a premium app and seeing an Alibaba ad on like the bottom of your screen, right? It's cheap. Next up, paywalls. And I'm not going to go into too much detail, but what you should definitely have is a free trial. If you have a hard paywall that can perform, but generally what performs better is a hard paywall that offers a free trial. Best case is probably around 7 days, because 3 days seems to underperform a bit. They can work, but 7 days is generally the best course of action when it comes to paywall. So 7-day free. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is basically everything that you need to know. I've outlined the main mistakes that people often make. I've outlined the main strategies that you can use to monetize your apps. And the last thing that you should know is how to market your apps. Because if you're watching this and you're considering building an app yourself, realistically, you probably don't have that big of a budget. And I'm going to touch on the budget topic a bit more. But if you have a small budget for marketing your app, what you should probably do is consider doing TikTok slideshows. And how they work is incredibly simple. To create these slideshows, what you can do is you can use Claude, because the quality it outputs is actually fairly amazing. This didn't work because I asked for custom word marks or whatever, but the visuals that Claude creates are very consistent, because as far as I know, it creates it in HTML or something like that and renders it as a PNG. So the quality is very consistent. It doesn't look like AI slop, and how it should work is very simple. So let's imagine this. First up, you have a slideshow. The first slide should be a very prominent hook. For Salesy, we can use something like top 5 objections that kill your sale. So let's say a top 5. Then you provide value, 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 value. And then at the end, preferably, you have a mockup directly from a screen of your app with something that says whatever, continue learning on XYZ app, or get more value by downloading our app, whatever. Think of the offer, consider it carefully, but the last slide should always be a call to action to your app, because you provide a value here, 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 and here. And after this, if the user went over to this slide, that automatically means that they are interested in whatever it is that you're providing. So they are more likely to click on whatever this button is, going to the App Store, because they are already interested. And something that you should consider, not only for app development, but if you run any social media marketing whatsoever, is the fact that don't stick to TikTok specifically. Anything whatsoever that you post on TikTok, you can post on Instagram, Twitter. Well, X is a bit worse, but whatever. You can post it on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever. And you can repurpose the content across all platforms. Because if you invest the time in making a post, then you need to make sure that it brings you the maximum possible value. If you only stick to TikTok, obviously you are going to only get users who already use TikTok. Just copy paste whatever you did here, do it on X, do it on Instagram, everywhere. Repurpose your content. And as I mentioned, I will briefly touch on the last point, which is budget. Because if you watch any videos on app development, a lot of people say that you can do it for free, which is a lie. You cannot publish an app on the App Store for free. The reason for this is that the App Store developer subscription alone costs $99 a year, which isn't bad at all, I would say. but it's something that you should consider if you're building an app. Google Play, as far as I remember, I think it was a $25 one-time fee. So again, not that bad, but something that you should consider. If you develop using Flutterflow, I would advise using Firebase as your backend. It has basically no cost unless you have thousands upon thousands of users. So essentially, the running cost of building a mobile app, if you don't have thousands of users, is going to be close to nothing. So you don't have to worry about that. But you need also things such as a website, a privacy policy, and so on, which if you create using, for example, Termly, it's also going to cost you something. Plus domain, etc. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is officially the end of what you need to know if you want to build a mobile app. Consider these points before building it, because you don't want to end up in a point where you don't know how to move forward, or at a point where you have already built a product but it flops because you didn't consider, for example, monetization. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is it. And if you want to skip all of this, then feel free to message me, because I have a company, Scholar Baltic, that specializes in creating revenue first mobile apps, such as Salesy right over here. So if that's not something you would be completely opposed to, let me know and we can have a conversation then. So thank you for watching, and see you all next time.